Mic testing, mic testing.
A very good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, despite the rain and the thunder. We really appreciate for your appreciative of your presence here with us tonight. So today's book launch slash seminar forum is based around the book written by Dr. Rachel Samuel and Dr. Rohana Arifin, Where Women Matter. So Where Women Matter is an anthology of 8 chapters which aims to provide an understanding of women's lives from 3 perspectives: economic, media, and legal. The book is meant to be consumable for both the public and the academics, for those who wish to delve deeper into the subject of women and the issues that are important to them. It is significant because it doesn't only expand the view of the variation of women's position, but also highlights the differences that they face. The book is available on sale, so you can get your copy after the seminar and also get it signed by Dr. Rachel and Dr. Rohana. It sells for 20 ringgit per copy. So without further ado, let's get tonight's proceedings started. So first, I would like to invite Dr. Rachel Samuel to give an overview of the book. Dr. Rachel Samuel holds a PhD in Human Resource Management from the University Science Malaysia, Penang. She is currently a senior lecturer with UiTM Melaka at its Faculty of Business and Management. Her previous work experiences include working with the Consumers Association of Penang, the National Drug Research Centre, and the International College Penang. Her research and writing mainly focuses on women and work, gender issues, employability, and social capital. In addition to teaching and doing research, she also volunteers as a para-counselor. Together with Dr. Rohana, she has edited and published 4 books on rape, domestic violence, and this latest one on women. Dr. Rachel, handing it over to you.
Very good evening to everyone. Thank you, Pei Jung, for the introduction. As was introduced by Pei Jung just now, this book, Where Women Matter, is actually not written by us, but just edited by Rohana and me. We put together the 8 chapters that were written by 8 different authors, mainly on different issues on women. And we grouped them into 3 perspectives, which economic, media, and legal perspective, right? So the first part of the book, the economic perspective, is made up of the first 3 chapters of the book, where the first chapter starts with focuses on Amartya Sen's multidimensional capability approach, right? And this chapter gives an overview for the next 2 chapters under the economic section. And it mainly, this chapter discusses how capabilities and functioning of women are impeded by institutions, as the way institutions operate impede women from fully capitalizing their capabilities and functioning. And the institutions here include religion, politics, family, education, media, job market, etc. Then chapter 2 dwells on the issue of poverty, mainly urban poverty, and how poverty hits women harder, especially because of the institutions, all right? And chapter 3 then discusses rural poverty, issues faced by women due to displacement, especially when they are forced out of the estates, issues of education, discrimination, and gangsterism faced by children, and the vicious cycle due to the barriers imposed by institutions. So in the first part of the book, the 3 chapters covers the areas. These are the areas that's covered by the 3 chapters, basically about capability and functioning and institutions, and how women are impeded in many ways because of the institutions. And then the second perspective, which is the media perspective. Here we have 2 chapters, chapters 4 and 5, basically discussing the role of media. And the questions that the authors brought up here include whether media is a catalyst for change. Does media promote gender equality? How does media influence public perception of women? Does media discriminate, or does media highlight issues of discrimination, right? And basically chapter 4 highlights how sensitive issues relating to, say, religion, for example, are discussed or presented differently by the various news portals, all right? And chapter 5 then highlights how media presents women differently based on their dressing and culture. And the chapter further highlights the experiences of the author in relation to her choice of attire. And this chapter was written by Dr. Rohana herself, and she will be going deeper into this chapter in a while. Finally, the last perspective is the legal perspective, and here we have 3 chapters, chapter 6, 7, and 8. Chapter 6 highlights workplace rights, gender equality, discrimination in relation to the conventions ratified by the state, and also the Islamic principles of equality. And then chapter 7 discusses on issues pertaining to finance and inheritance, relating to divorce, both for Muslims and non-Muslims. The final chapter, chapter 8, is on women in prison, which highlights the issues of justice. Mainly in the prisons, there are 2 main groups of women. One group are in prison because of having sex outside marriage. And then when they go to register the child without a marriage certificate, they are imprisoned with the child. And usually the man escapes most of the time. And so they are in prison with the child until a certain period when the authorities feel that they can be released. And then there's another group of women involved in drug peddling. And most of the time, because of their partners who are drug peddlers themselves. And then when they get caught, these peddlers will look for someone else to replace them and carry on peddling, whereas the women will be in the prison. And usually they have many children because they're married 2 or 3 times. And the children are given away to people who are willing to care for them. And the children then grow up without both the parents, just like the way these women grew up themselves, because it's like it is a vicious cycle, because they grow up in families where either one or both parents were emotionally or sometimes physically absent, and then their children face the same fate. And this is what they were trying to avoid, but it ends up the same way. So this chapter writes about the stories of these women, usually not told or not heard by others, because we went to the prison and we actually spoke to all of them, and these are their own stories actually. So basically the book gives voice to some groups of women, highlighting their stories. Some are micro, but when put together, they do give us a macro view of matters that actually matter to women. And a lot of time these matters are not brought up. So basically this is just a sharing on the overview of the book itself. Right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rachel, for the sharing. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Rohana Arifin, who will also give a presentation, mostly focused on cultural imperialism and that affect the images and the roles of women over the years and other issues. Dr. Rohana Arifin was a lecturer and associate professor in University Science Malaysia from 1983 to 2003, teaching women's studies and industrial relations for 20 years. She was also formerly the secretary and vice president of the Staff Academic Association at USM. Dr. Rohana has written 22 papers for journals on women and feminism, and up to 8 books on topics like trade unions, violence against women, and feminism, among others. She was also formerly the president of Penang's Women's Centre for Change, WCC, and Parti Rakyat Malaysia. Interestingly, she has earned herself a trainer's and a black belt in martial arts, Mushindo. Dr. Rohana, please.
I would like to thank, good evening, I would like to thank the Penang Institute for inviting us and for YB Sharina for having to give us a talk again, because we had given a talk about 2 weeks ago. Thank you. And I see that Dr. Jayabalan is also here again. Doctor, don't fall asleep because we're going to talk about almost the same thing, about cultural imperialism. And of course, I would also like to welcome Barbara and Visu, who's actually my spiritual leader. Namaste. I'm very thankful of him to give me the spiritual journey that I have undergone so far. Thank you very much. Today, my talk will be on cultural imperialism, although my topic in the book was on women perception and the various imagery about the Muslim women. But can I have the next slide, please? So it's more on cultural imperialism. How is it that now, with all the 1970s imagery have changed completely for the Malay women, we have now begun to add on the hijab. So I said this has come about because in the 70s, with the collapse of the Shah of Iran was due to corruption and so on, the mullahs took over the country, and the repercussion of Iran, like now, we have another big movement about the woman who was killed in the police custody. She was killed, and many of the women are now burning the hijab. So I think this may have also a repercussion. But in the 1970s, when the mullahs took over and formed an Islamic government in Iran, it has a widespread repercussion all over the world because they are Shia. So when in the 70s, when they overthrow the Western government, the Saudi government, which was Sunni and which was propagating Wahhabism, they got very scared. They said, oh, Shia is going to spread all over the world. Therefore, we shall spread faster than them. So what the Wahhabi Saudis did was, they went all over the world to finance, including the Islamic University, including the NGOs and so on. And one of their strong proponents then was Anwar Ibrahim. So we have that Anwar then. And then when Anwar was quite strong, Dr. Mahathir, Tun Mahathir was very worried. He said, oh, if we don't get Islam under control, we will be overrun by them. So he took Anwar into the Ministry of Education. Of all the ministry, he put them in education. So that's where the spread of Wahhabism, Salafism began to take root in the Malaysian society. Can we have the next one, please? Next one. So, but the government is always very concerned about the spread of left-wing communism, socialism in this country. They're not aware that another big force is spreading in Malaysia, which is Wahhabism and Salafism. You know, the spread of Islam, which is the more conservative interpretation of Islam in the country. We're not saying that Islam was not in Malaysia at that time, but the interpretation was more moderate. But with the coming of Wahhabism and Salafism, it becomes stronger. But the government is still focused on arresting the PSM people, you know, the spread of socialism, which is anti-God, no God, and so on. So the government's obsession with trying to control opposition with secular ideology make the spread of Islam very small, and which was almost forgotten. But this spread of Wahhabism and Salafism was going steadily all over the country. And this is what I call cultural imperialism, where the Malay culture began to change very much into Islamic culture, or I would say Arabism of the culture of the Malays. Can I have the next slide, please? If you see in the 80s and 90s, most of the women NGOs, they are normal, you know, like Marina Mahathir, Maria Chin, and so on. They are just open like the culture of the 70s, where you have pop yeye, you know, and then you have the Hollywood culture and so on. But it is slowly being overtaken by the culture of Arabism. And then you see the spread of the Obedient Wife Club. This Obedient Wife Club says that you must please your man whichever way. The best way to please your man, so that he won't go around to do all the sins, is to learn the technique of satisfaction from a high-class prostitute, the first-class prostitute. I don't know where they're going to find this high-class prostitute, but they will try, you know. You must please your husband. If your husband stray, it is all your fault. So it's always the fault of the woman here, always the fault of the victim, not the fault of the perpetrator. This is the kind of very insidious message which they are giving to the Malay culture. Okay. Then may I have the next one? So eventually, you find that a lot of the women politicians began to also cover up and don the Arabization kind of costume, and the kind of Malay Nusantara budaya is slowly being swept away. Because if you see the Malay Nusantara, they wear the selendang, right? Can we have the next image, please? You see the wife of ministers and all that before that, you find that they are still very much in the tradition of the Malay Nusantara. They have the selendang, they have the baju and so on, including some of them. I think most of them you know, especially Rosmah, you know, kan? Always in the papers nowadays. Then you have, of course, Zizi, Azad and Mokhtar, also now facing charges in court. Although they take on a lot of the Islamic values, but corruption is like, not part of the Islamic value. Okay, so you have Badawi now who is also having Alzheimer, Zahid and so on. So this was the initial stage of Islamization where the Malay costume is still accepted as a standard costume. And then eventually, the next slide please. Eventually, people began to look at the icon, political icon, you know. Of course, Rosmah has a problem with her handbags and so on, and her other acquisition of jewelry and so on. But Wan Azizah is seen as an iconic wife of Anwar Ibrahim, you know, iconic leader with that kind of costume. And Anwar is one of the first minister who have all his wife, who have his wife and daughters all covered up according to the proper Muslim costume with the hijab. Can I have the next slide? So the question now, what is the proper Muslim family? The proper Muslim family is this one, yeah. So this is all has been propagated from the 780s when Anwar came into power. So now this has become the acceptable, and sometimes Siti Hasmah also has to cover herself up to be more acceptable. Next, please. So from the top and from the schools and so on, the Arabization of the attire has become an acceptable part of the Malay culture. So even in the fashion industry now, you got all kinds of tudung, you got all kinds of robe, and then you got all this whitening cream. You know, you use whitening cream, but you must be under the hijab. So I always wonder, why do you need that whitening cream for, right? You covered up already. But no, you know. So the beauty of the woman is still there. The propagation of objectifying the woman is still there, but your head must be covered. They have this thing about the hair, you know, there's this certain theory about the hair that according to their interpretation, that a woman's hair can pull a bullock cart. You know, bullock cart? So that the moment you see a woman's hair, you know, you're completely pulled, you know, by unseen forces. so this is somewhat of the belief that a woman should not only cover her head, her hair, but also must cover her neck and all that. Must cover her neck. Rachel. So next, please. So now it has gone to the school level. Even if you look at education at, let's say in the morning, 9 o'clock, when the sun is quite hot, you find all the schoolgirls are now wearing hijab and playing. They cannot just tie up their hair like that to play, you know. So in other words, if you look at all this, you find that I think there is a tendency to discourage women from taking up sports. Because if you're going to play like this, I'm sure doctor will know, if you cover your head like this, is it going to be hot or not when you play games? You cover and then you cover all that to the leg, you know. So you find that this is a form of discouraging the women from taking up sports and from going outdoor too much, you know. It's a form of control. To me, it's a form of control. So next slide, please. This thing happened when the spread of Wahhabism, Salafism in the 80s and going to the 90s, where this DJ, she was a DJ, when they wanted to introduce the hudud law, so she began to question it in the radio. She asked them, what do you think? You know, what do readers think? What do listeners think and all? That's all a role. What do you think it is? But then they were very upset, you know. How can you question the hudud law? So she get all kinds of threat, you know, you watch out, you woman, will come and kill you, will come and rape you, that kind of thing. So they try to downplay, they try to intimidate this lady. So she had a hard time that time. So the program was taken off the air for her. And of course, not the next slide, please. Of course, the next one would be the women politician who provide the super ideology of the society. This is an iconic thing that now the last time passed and UMNO women, they just come with the red costume and so on, including Sharizat, who has her cows in the condominium. So she also now began to cover to be accepted by the Malay society, because even if you're corrupt in the Malay society, you must be seen as a good Muslim. But how do you see as a good Muslim and corruption that goes together? I cannot understand it, but see all of them now have began to decide that this is the best pattern. If not, you're not accepted in the hall or in the assembly where you walk in. It's very rare, like Azalina. She's one of the very few UMNO woman who's not covered. And she's trying to take up the case of mothers, of children born of Malaysian mothers outside the country. She's trying to make, why not, after all Malaysian men can have children outside the country, why not the Malaysian women? But it has not been passed, it has been rejected. So of course now we go to the Ministry of Women Affairs, the next one. Our dear lady there, so she has to dress up. However well you're dressed up, however well you use whatever medicine, or however well you use for your lips and all that, but you must be within an acceptable image. And the government is rewarding people to be in a ministry, not based on the expertise. So you put Rina Harun there, whose background is banking and finance. So there she is. And the second one is from PAS. This PAS woman, during the COVID, when many of the air hostess and so on pilots were retrenched, her main concern was why aren't the air hostess costume to be loosened? Because the present costume that they wear in Malaysian Airlines is showing the figure. And then Syed Siddiq was very upset by this. Syed Siddiq from Muda, he says, we are concerned about the livelihood of these people. Why are you talking about costume, So you see, this is what the Ministry of Women Affairs are saying. And they're iconic. And of course, the Ministry of National Unity is also another one who also start to cover. Okay, so this is one of what you call the silent effect of Wahhabism and Salafism in our society. And then of course you get one or two like Siti Kasim. The next one, please. Siti Kasim, Siti Kasim with the blonde hair and so on, who resisted this kind of control. She's going to stand in Batu, I think, in the next election soon. And of course, it's Mariam Lee, who refuses to wear the hijab. In fact, she wears the hijab and she takes it off. So it's very confrontational, So sometimes I think it's good to have this shock tactic, but at the same time, I don't know how far the repercussion would be. But now she has gone around without wearing the hijab. And of course, there's a lot of condemnation on her in the social media, just like Siti Kasim, she also get a lot of condemnation. So now I just talk about my perception, my experience as an NGO. Next, please. When I was in the NGO in the 70s, 80s, which shows how old I am now, then we can just be like this. It's acceptable, from the media. The media will say, okay, NGO, your views are accepted and all that, or not accepted and so on. And then I went for the general election. The next slide, please. Then general election 2004. At that time, the coalition was with PAS. The Keadilan was with PAS. So you can just imagine, from there I have to start covering like this part. And the PAS lady was accompanying me around to give talks after 8:30 at night, because after the prayers in Balik Pulau. So I have to be there. So I have to cover, she's very particular, she said, can see your hair, cover your hair, she said, cover your hair. So I have to cover my hair. So this one is just not so cover yet, but usually I have to wear that. For 8 days, we were given to campaign for 8 days. And the campaign always starts after 8:30 because the mosque will not allow this one before the prayers. So you just imagine for 8 days in the hot sun, in the morning I have to distribute leaflet and all that. I got my for 8 days. So migraine tablet and then election, give a talk, and then migraine tablet the next day. So I feel the heat. I don't know about the other women, but I do feel the heat on my head, campaigning around. So then I became the PRM president for a while. So I had to go overseas and all that. So this is the acceptable cover because I wear the bandana for the image of PRM. Because if I don't wear this, cover my head a little bit, it's not acceptable in the social media. So my friends in PRM says, please, at least show an acceptable image for the left-wing party. And before I joined this, I had I asked advice from my spiritual teacher. Should I cover my head or should I join politics or not? And he said, I remember his advice. He said, if it's for the good of the community, for society, you take up the post. I still remember that. So this is basically my perception and my experience as from an NGO to a political figure to a political head. This is my experience. So when I'm talking about my experience, at the same time, I'm trying to explain the social context of women in politics, of the Malay women, of the schoolgirls, and so on, and what kind of conditions they are subjected to, and of course they say that this is the teaching, the correct teaching, and whether they're allowed to question it. So this is the situation. This is what I call cultural subversion of the Malay society now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rohana. For now, I would like to invite Dr. Rohana, Dr. Rachel, and as well as YB Shalina to be on the stage. So before we start off tonight's panel discussion, as well as taking Q&A questions from the audience, I would like to invite YB Shalina to say a few words regarding her perceptions and the importance of the book. So a quick introduction, although I don't think she needs one. YB Shalina Abdul Rashid is currently a member of the Penang Legislative State Assembly representing Seri Delima, a constituency located in Penang Island. She is also the Assistant Publicity Secretary for DAP Penang and a National Executive Committee member of the party's National Women's Wing. Currently, YB Shalina also serves on the Board of Directors for Penang STEM, Penang Science Cluster, Penang Green Council, Penang Women's Development Corporation, Penang Halal International Hub, as well as Penang Convention and Exhibition Bureau. YB Shalina, some thoughts from you?
Thank you very much. Testing. Can everybody hear me? Oh, awesome. So just a few thoughts. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending, for being able to participate in what I do believe is a very important forum tonight. Although it's raining outside, but you all made it here. And, this is actually the second time that we're doing a discussion based on this book. The first time was held, I think a few months ago, 2 weeks ago. Oh, but previously it was at the Gandhi Center at Waterfall, which Dr. Jayabalan was also present. And again, it was a very important session, and I felt that this book needs to be out there, regardless of what gender you are, regardless of what religious beliefs you embrace. This book can give you a better insight on what is lacking and how we can help build this nation. Now, I do believe that, number one, I think we can agree that media plays a very important role right now. And I do agree with what Dr. Rachel said. Media is actually a tool that can help shape how you think. It can also help shape what you feel. And do I agree with that? I try not to. But if you look at how social media is so popular right now, there's a danger. Also, it's dangerous, especially when you're trying to to convey important messages, be it socially or even politically. Because back then, you used to write statements. Statements used to be thousands of words. Then people said, no, write 500, because nobody reads journals and things like that. And then now with Facebook, people read captions. And now with TikTok, people just watch videos. So the danger is, how do you condense very important messages in 1 minute? It's very difficult. But then also the danger is that when you have people who are not too well versed with certain issues, ignorance can be very detrimental in nation building. And this is where sometimes when you look at how certain political messages are being distorted, and more so religious ideas and interpretation, this becomes very dangerous. I cannot stress enough how dangerous, the fight is right now. And, you look at distortions of facts. The best way is you look at some of the memes and videos circulating on TikTok right now, be it whatever political organization you believe in, but you can see, especially right now with, GE15, will it happen? It will, but we just don't know when yet. But if you look at TikTok and social media, there's a lot of slander messages, disinformation going out. And the one main thing that I also want to highlight, which is also really important in the book, is the rise of extremist views. Now, religion teaches us to be good. There's no such thing that any religion teaches you to act in a very, very hateful manner. I just don't believe that. And I do believe that everyone in here agrees with that saying. What is going on right now is just the misinterpretation of religious ideals and all of that. And also one thing that Dr. Rohana mentioned, again, I have to also mention, is the Ministry of Women's Affairs. Ministry of Women's Affairs is a very important portfolio. But sometimes it seems like it's not being given the same importance as other portfolios. So you have a situation where some of the decision makers decide, okay, this is something that you need to fill, go ahead. Kalau tak faham, tak apalah, okay. So this is that attitude that we are facing right now, and this is why we have ministers holding very important portfolios, and they have no idea on what to do or what policies or even how people think and feel. When you're faced with a pandemic and the rising, cases of domestic violence, you don't release statements or even information that says, oh, wanita kena cakap macam Doraemon, come on lah. No, that is not the way forward. And as a woman, and I see some of you nodding, yeah, that is just disrespectful. It is. And also, what is interesting that I want to highlight is the Obedient Wives Club. Yes. So the Obedient Wives Club is actually a very interesting club because what they portray is internalized sexism, which I do believe that it's more dangerous than anything else, because what you have is a group of women, rather than rising up, standing up, and pushing for right reforms, what they do is they say, it's okay, yes, semua ni salah kita, this is all our fault. So when you have women who should stand up, join us in this good fight, and they have such mindset, so in other words, it makes our push for social reforms longer than it should. But this is where I do believe everyone here and people watching, don't give up. Yeah, jangan putus asa. I do believe that change can happen. It's just a matter of continuously talking about it, and hopefully Penang Institute can have more forums like this where we can keep discourse alive. And again, coming back to this book, if you haven't had the chance to read it, do support the book. It is great, and I do believe that this is again something that you can share amongst your friends. And again, one way for us to build back as a nation is through continuous discussions. And it's democracy after all, right? So you have to have rational discussions to continue to talk about much needed issues. How can we as a country, set aside religious beliefs. Because we do understand that right now in Malaysia, race-based politics, identity politics is at fever pitch. But there are enough like-minded Malaysians out there, and also people in general, who we believe that, yeah, Malaysians are still Malaysians. Tak kisahlah kaum apa pun, kita bangsa Malaysia. And this is the main point that I hope everybody remembers. Also the book. For us to propel, for us to improve as a nation, we have to get rid of orang kata kerangka perkauman. Regardless of race, gender, whatever capabilities, sexual orientation, whatnot, we're all Malaysians. And what we want is to push for a better Malaysia. But that, coming back to this book again, one last thing before I end, yeah? Another thing that was mentioned was Aisha Tajuddin. So this happened a few years ago, and there was actually the whole issue about hudud. PAS wanted to put hudud and all of that. And so BFM created a video, and I'm not sure if it's still circulating in YouTube. So right after that video was uploaded and published, she received a lot of threats, a lot of negative and really just nauseating comments. And this is something that needs to be addressed also. Misogyny and online misogyny, and how social media can be a very dangerous tool that can also further divide people. Social media is actually a wonderful thing. Digitalization, the birth of internet, is a beautiful thing because it brings nations closer with just a click of a button. Say if you want to know a little bit more about certain policies, recipes, or even politics, it's right there. You don't really have to go to the library, but I do recommend going to the library. Books are awesome. But again, internet and so forth, but then there's always that danger because with media and internet, there's a lot of distortion that can happen. And I think we can continue. I'll pass it back to Pei Jung, and maybe we can open up for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Wabi Shalina. I think those are some very powerful thoughts that I think all of us will spend some time pondering throughout the night. So I think what strikes me most about the presentations from Dr. Rachel and Dr. Rohana, and as well as Wabi Shalina's words, I was very intrigued by how Dr. Rohana presented sort of like the devolution of the Malay Nusantara culture, from how it was to how is it like today. And also talking about how the media always plays such an important role in basically influencing the society. I'd just like to raise a question to our speakers. Like, do you feel that Malaysia's media, particularly the traditional media, have they also been propagating this sort of Malay Arabization culture? Like, kind of like, are they really putting it out there and supporting this kind of culture? And is there any way that we could actually return to the Malay Nusantara roots, which is actually very culturally very enriching? Dr. Rohana, perhaps you'd like to take a go at it?
Yeah, I think it'll be a very long struggle because if you look at now everything is, if you present a more fairer version, like you said, no racism, they say, oh, this is secularism, this is Western idea, And I think if you look at the conventional media, it also goes along with what is saleable in a society. So you have a lot of all the various religious teachers in the Malay papers, and besides religious teachers propagating their more conservative view, they also have pages and pages of fashion, which shows the hijab is an acceptable way of life. So there was a chapter before mine which shows what the conventional media has been portraying Sisters of Islam struggle was. In fact, Sisters of Islam was struggling against being banned by Jakim, I think. By Jakim. And then how the media portrays Sisters of Islam. They say Sisters of Islam is this group of, unruly Muslim women trying to create trouble and all that. And these are supported by several of the conventional media. except of course for, I think, Star. Star was a bit more mild, but they wouldn't dare go into this kind of situation. They say, oh, sisters, Islam has the right to exist because of this issue. But the other newspapers either remain silent or propagating antagonism against sisters of Islam. So that chapter is, if you read, it is true that the main media now is still pushing for what is popular in the society.
Dr. Rachel, any thoughts? Maybe Shalina?
Okay, I just want to add a few things because you specifically mentioned about traditional media. So a few things, just very short points. So traditional media, sometimes it's all a question of ownership. Who owns traditional media? There's a question of funding. So obviously when it's funded by certain groups, then they would want that particular media to print out their version of truths. So, and also there's questions of censorship. So if you want something more of, I wouldn't say freer, but something that's less biased, then we do have online media. But then again, with online media, it's free for all. So that's a question of, is this verified news? What is this? So it comes back to media literacy, and that's something of a education issue that needs to be identified as well.
Going back to the media, one of the points that Dr. Rachel made in her presentation about the media is that whether the media can be a discrimination towards women or maybe an ally towards women. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the media that we consume today, even traditional media or social media, how do you feel that women's rights and women empowerment are being portrayed? Do you feel that people are still basically ragging on women a lot more than they are? Or has the media been more supportive of women's rights and gender equality, especially in terms of Malaysia and in terms of the issues that Malaysian women face?
Need a few minutes to think about this. I would say that there are a lot of issues that's brought up nowadays in the newspapers, that's for sure. But it's how they talk about those issues, you know. And sometimes they don't go into the background, you know, like how Rohana presented, you know, like when we talk about the evolution of the dressing of the women, for example, you don't talk about how it came, you know, how it came about. So there are a lot of young people who do not understand what is actually happening. So you just see it as it is, the issue is brought up, but you do not know what actually transpired prior to this happening. And there's not a lot of research done in these things. And so the understanding is very shallow when it comes to issues faced by women, you know, and things that are brought up, for example, you know, like when we talk about the women in the prison, for example, you know, like immediately it's like, oh, you know, they did something wrong and that's why they are there. But, you know, the background to these things that are not discussed, you know, and this is definitely not things that will sell in the newspapers. They're not going to write about these things, for sure.
And I also think that, excuse me, and they don't elaborate on certain issues like the sexual harassment law, which has come into being most reluctantly by the women ministry, I know. But we have discussed this in the MTUC, Mariam. In 1996, we have discussed this. We had to push for the trade union code, after which we want the trade union act to come in. We have been pushing for it, you know, many of the women's organizations. But of course, the ministry, before it comes into Sexual Harassment Act, she wants to do a survey, whether the survey said yes or no, you know, that kind of stuff. And the newspaper carries this. But the newspaper should have shown that this is a history of struggle by women's groups, by unions and so on, about gender violence, sexual harassment and so on. But this was not. And just like what Rachel said, no, it's a very class issue about women who are in prison because of the Sharia law, because the Sharia law says that women are the one who should take care of your own chastity, you know. Don't expect men to respect you. So if you have an illegal child, you are responsible. Therefore, you go to prison. But nowadays it's very easy. You could just take a DNA test. Of course, you know who's the father, right? But no, I think that part is not so important. Now you women, because you don't know how to take care of yourself, you brought illegal children, therefore you should be punished. There are many cases of that in the Kajang prison, right? Before Najib went in, I think. So in the Kajang prison, we know that the case about Najib in Kajang prison is not true. Many of the stories are not true. They say, oh, and he wants to have a house there, the warden's house. That's not true. The warden are all staying outside. We know because we've been there a few times, you know. We went to do our research. In fact, if he has been in the Sungai Buloh one, he will have better treatment because Anwar was there, right? He's through. But the Kajang prison is, I tell you, the crap is a pits. We know, again. So there are many issues which cover women, you know, we should be covered. Not only the news, splash the news that, oh, women are a rape victim. You know, because of the COVID, the children are raped by their own father and all that, which is more than the stepfather. But the history of it, I think the media should make it a point to put a historical angle to it. And then the main news, so that people, when they read, the youth, when they read, they understand that this is the cause, the social factor, and what is the class system that has created this. So I think that's where the media fails. Instead of splashing big news, you know, we have to understand a little bit of the background, so that I think Malaysians should learn to appreciate history a bit more. You know, they think, history not important, you know. But I think history is very important. But of course, the interpretation of history is also from the ruler's point of view. They say, you know, who is the women who struggle for rights here? Ibu Sin. So I was thinking, Ibu Sin. Of course, she propagates for education for women. I appreciate her contribution. But there are lots of other women who fought against colonialism, like Shamsia Fakir. She went into the jungle and fought, you know, not easy for her. And she gave birth to a child in the jungle. These are history. Women who fight against colonialism, but this is not in the history book. And then you got Khatijah Siddiq. Khatijah Siddiq, she is also a woman who from past background. That time past was very progressive. So she went into the Muktamar Islam. She said women, she said, should have more representation in the assembly. That time was assembly, I think. Tengku Rahman was very upset with her. Tengku said, oh, this woman is troublesome. Replace her with Fatimah Hamidun or whatever. Fatimah, that one, the Minister of Welfare. These are all history which is not written. Actually, a lot of women history should be rewritten. I think YB Salina can have a project on that. Next project.
Shalina, any thoughts?
I do agree that coming back about history is actually very interesting. But the problem is, how can we make it interesting? Because based on what we've learned in secondary school, it is a very heavily biased version of history. So there are a lot of really important key figures that are conveniently left out, such as Samsia. Tak boleh lah. Samsia dia parti komunis. Oh goodness, jangan lah. So see, there's a lot of biasness. But when we talk about education, this involves another round of reforms, because we do know that education really is a federal issue. And there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed as well. I don't know, maybe I can say this. I do believe that when it comes to education, it should be an issue tackled at state levels. It should not be handled by federal. But then again, you know, that is another round of debates and could open up another round of very important discussions.
Thank you, YB. I do take YB's point on the importance of decentralization. Just from my point of view, I think it's important that each state, maybe we are going a bit away from the topic tonight, but it's very important that each state has the autonomy in deciding things that's best for themselves, because they know themselves the best. I think for now, I'll open up the floor to take a few questions for our speakers. Does anyone have a question? Yes, please. Please introduce yourself. No, you don't need to stand.
Well, my name is Mo Nazro from Canadian Gems. So basically, my question is, well, let me start off with an anecdote. I was in Malaysia from the 80s and 90s as I grew up in the States. And I grew up with pictures of my aunties, plural, not wearing tudung. So when I came back to Malaysia in 2000, they were all covered. And it was nice that Doctor, that you had in your slide about the Arabization of Malaysia, because when I first came back, one of my first things that I said to my parents is, why are we adopting desert culture? I know it's crude, but it's true. Why are we adopting desert culture when we are, in fact, Sumatran jungle culture in a way? So my question is this. Just like the saying from Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was the revolutionist against the British colonial presence in India. And of course, his quote was adopted by Michelle Obama, which was, the measure of how civilized a society is based on how it treats its women. So my question is, from the 80s till now, there seems to be a slow boil on the removal of women's rights and the demonification of, basically it's a witch hunt, Salem witch hunt to any women who stands up, voices up. And it's been going on for 20, 30 years or more. And you've been there since the 70s, 80s, I haven't. Looking at how the slow burn progressed, how do you think we can reverse 20, 30 years of Arabization?
That's a huge question. So which one of our three panelists would want to tackle it?
I only hope it's like a cycle when it goes up. There's a sedimentation, and then the younger generation now, like those in the 10 years old, 11 years old, will slowly begin to question why, why are we wearing this? And then I like to play sports, but it's in the hot sun, I have to wear this. Why? So maybe the cycle will come up again. That is seen from a positive point of view, but I'm not sure. I think it will take generations. But with more education, with more bravery, with more questioning in the social media, perhaps this can generate some kind of questioning. Because to me, I find that not so long ago, people do read philosophy. People read Greek literature, Russian literature, English literature, and so on. So they began to develop a certain kind of viewpoint, a certain kind of ideology in which they are very certain about what they believe, how they behave. But now I think people don't read anymore philosophy. Philosophy is a no in university even. Nobody takes philosophy. They think, philosophy is all these ideas, they throw here, they throw there. But actually philosophy makes you think and come to a certain point objectively. So that when you read all kinds of literature, you come to your own will. Now they said, orang kata, jom kita ikut. What is orang kata? You have to read and understand, but not many of the younger generation thinks that way. So when your question said, how are we going to reverse it? I think it's going to take many more years, but we can always try. As Che Guevara says, our day will come, the struggle must go on. I always believe in that, but I don't know when. You're younger than me, you can. I might be dead by then.
Dr. Rachel, Wabi Shalina, any thoughts?
Okay, I just want to share a few thoughts. When we talk about Islamicization and what we see presented right now is, I do believe it all, you can find it stemming from, say, the Iranian Islamic Revolution. And what we see right now is, I do think it's a peak. But what is interesting right now, when you look at what's going on in Iran at the moment, a few days ago, I saw a video on Twitter. A group of schoolgirls in Iran, they were protesting. They were throwing their hijabs. And it is a site that I thought could potentially bring some changes. We might not see changes right now, but I do believe that in a generation or two, things might change. Things will. That's what I believe. Things won't change if people give up. I mean, that's certain. That really is. But also what is happening right now is that, politically and historically, we always see PAS versus UMNO. And, PAS versus UMNO, they've always tried to be the more Islamic organization. It's like, okay, if you're going to be this, we're going to do this. So they were up the ante with one another to the point where, it just held the entire country hostage. And another thing that needs to be addressed is how some of the schools, sekolah-sekolah madrasah, are still not regulated. Sekolah tahfiz dan sebagainya. And the big question is who's funding it and who's controlling the syllabus? And why is no one taking action? But these are some of the things that I believe, we will continue to press for answers. But again, changes can happen. And like I said, it will. It's just a matter of time. And if we're going to do changes, if we're going to create those changes, do it for our children, do it for the future generation.
Thanks. I think that resonates really strongly, right? That if we don't continue and keep trying, then change is just never ever going to happen. So if you want to, okay, begitulah, macam ni lah, we can't change anything, then the country is not going to move forward. So I think it's very important to remember this, not just for women's rights, but basically for everything the country stands for. Can I take another question from the audience? Dr. Jayabalan?
Understanding attitude would not happen. I think we have to come up with open on various issues. I think the last issue on garbage schools and regulation, they are sprouting up, true. Yes. They are sprouting up, and some policy issues, policymakers like you can take this issue up because the licensing of all this under the policy, people who handle policy. So these are things that should be looked into, I feel. Then look at your own, look at the state itself. You've got a women's organization called Wanita Mutiara. You agree? And this Wanita Mutiara is basically what just now somebody mentioned, is about, again, it comes back to policymakers, who are, and their wives, who now sit regularly, and their thing is just play a secondary role rather than move forward in this agenda. So I think these are things that should be addressed. And the other thing is that I notice you need a lot of evidence. It just cannot be anecdotes. And to get evidence, you need to do some research and get this evidence into play, so much so that you can now take up these issues on the evidence that you have. Just mere anecdotes don't help. I think this is where I think, people like Rachel and all are great researchers. We should move into this area of research rather than, just anecdotal evidence, because if you want change, it has got to be on the basis of class. It cannot be on the basis. You see, I must also give you a little bit. This issue of postmodernism and feminism, when did it come up? It came out something like this, 1968, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. And it came out because the French left, the ultra left was very disillusioned with the movement in what was happening in France. They were so disillusioned. And then came this new issues on postmodernism and even feminism. But what I'm trying to say, rather than just be talking as an elite, what I'm saying is that these are part and parcel of the class, part and parcel of the class problem that you have in every society. And women are definitely discriminated at work. I mentioned it the last time. The MTUC, as Dr. Rohanna just mentioned, MTUC has raised a huge number of issues, standing system of work for women, and the number of people who are discriminated, and the women who are discriminated who come across from Kedah, from mainland, to work in all these electronic factories, producing all the chips and so on. They are highly discriminated. Their wages are not commensurate. Secondly, the work system is also very discriminatory. So what I'm saying is like that, like what Dr. Ravana suggested, we have got to take up these sort of issues and then not base it just on anecdotes. We need to go beyond anecdotes, write pieces, and then now that you have got 1 minute TikTok will be enough to stimulate, people's apprehension. So I feel these are some of the things that we should do. And I just want some comments or feedback from you. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to add a few things. I do like the idea, and yes, I do agree that if you want to push for actual changes, you need research and facts to back it up. So if we want to push for social reforms, it can't be done by only one group. But I do believe that it is a collective effort from the researchers, universities, and policymakers. I'd like to touch on issue sekolah tafis. I have at my level to also raise this issue, but guess what? I'm from a party. I'm from DAP, and I've received a lot of questions thrown back. What does your party know? And more so, me being a woman and how I present myself, apa yang you tahu? So again, to raise such issues, there also needs to be a change in how people accept people who raise these issues, a change of mindset. So second, what's interesting, just to share with you about the Wanita Mutiara. So Wanita Mutiara is actually an association for the spouses of Wakil Rakyats, all the EXCOs and all the other YBs, spouses. So I did ask, can my husband join? Because actually Wanita Mutiara is only meant for women. So the fact that when they were like, oh, tak tahu pula kan. So the next question was, well, do the husbands of female YBs and EXCOs, do they have an organization, association? Oh, tak ada. So that itself shows you that something needs to change, right? And by the way, my husband's here. And then last point that we were actually talking earlier on, way before the forum started, the term assemblyman. And I believe that right now it should be assembly person. But there's still some editors and still some people who still think that the word assemblyman is the correct word. Janganlah, kita pun wanita. So again, these are the changes that I do believe we need to push for. And it doesn't need a lot of research, but it can be done at the grassroots levels as well.
Dr. Rachel?
I think what Dr. Jaya said just now about evidence and research and all, it's very important. But as what YB Shalina also said, that we can't just exist just with our research, because if we don't have someone to bring forward the research and, bring it forward, then that is also a problem. Because I know Doc has done a lot of research, especially on occupational health and safety. And I think from those days, I think it was in the 80s, so what we used to do on women in the at the workplace, occupational health and safety and all that. But to then bring it forward and let people know about it, I think there wasn't so much of spreading what was actually happening, and so not many people know about it. So the need to work together to bring up these issues, I think, is very important, and to bring it out in media, which is the other thing that we were talking about. Whether they were actually right about these things, and it's actually something that people want to know and hear about.
Dr. Rana, any thoughts?
It's true, you need research and you need grassroots work. I think we have to mobilize the grassroots, and because many of the social problems, violence and so on, are mainly the B40, and the reported cases, some in the middle group, like in the WCC, you find many of the cases affecting women, people who are rather on the lower income side. But I think this is also a very class issue. It's not only an issue of the women and versus the men violence and all that, but I think it's also the social system that is existing. When we have a very class structure, when the government, those in government are mainly interested in neoliberalism, mainly interested in capitalism, corporatization and so on. And these issues are not important to them, never mind, we build all these condominiums costing 1 million, 1 million here, people can buy 1 million, 1 million, and then we build for the rakyat lah, about 1 or 2 flats, which cost about 315 now, Mariam. 315 is 650 square feet, 650 square feet, you just imagine try and live in 650 square feet. Oh, it's okay as long as you build for the poor. So I think it's the whole superstructure, the whole system that is in existence in Malaysia. If we can make Malaysia a more democratic, less class structure, I think all these issues will be taken into account. But if the system is more for the rich, the corporate sector, you can build any kinds of development here, you build up in the sky. Because I live in Balik Pulau now, that's the only decent place I think is not so expensive, still expensive. They want to build an old folks home, don't call old folks, senior citizen home. And you know what sort of building they're going to put there? A 30-story building for old people up in the sky, so that when you die, your soul goes straight lah. No need to come down, So I said to the developer, what sort of development is this? The old people, they need a yard, they need planting, they need a bit of plant, they need to play with the animal. He said, it's profit motive. So what do we do this kind of system? It's a bit hard, because we the poor, actually we're quite poor, we're all professional, we haven't taken corruption before in the wrong political party. When you come out and say all these things, who is going to listen to us? They rather listen to the corporate sector, because the corporate will give money to the state, right? Correct or not? To the state. And this one is a fact, give to the political party, give to the state. So we in the NGO try, open our mouth and say, very few people listen. But if the forces are in the ground can start listening, then there might be some change in the democratic process of the society. That's how I feel. It's a long struggle.
Thanks. Moving on, there's a chapter on economic issues in the book where women matter, and also adding on to what Dr. Jaya Balan has raised up just now. Really, the wage gaps in Malaysia gender wage gaps in Malaysia are still pretty apparent, I would say, because as recent as year 2020, female managers actually earn 10% less compared to male managers for the same amount of work done. And for those in the mid-skill sector, the wage gaps for services and sales are 21%, and for clerical work is 15%. So the wage gaps are quite obvious. So I just want to get our panelists' thoughts on this. In Malaysia so far, what has there actually been any concrete effort to close these wage gaps? And what are some of the other economic barriers that women are facing today, especially for those who are in the mid-skill or the low-skill employment sectors?
I think the wage gap is very obvious, but a lot of times people are not aware. A lot of them are not aware. Like if you talk to the students about the wage gap, they don't believe that they are paid less than men. A lot of the female students, they don't believe, because they just feel they're paid well, that's it. But they are not aware that actually there's a wage gap in a lot of the, from the professional level right up to the lower level, from up to down, down to up. Yeah, the reasons, of course, as given by the management, is always because of the, the women having a lot of other outside responsibilities, responsibilities to their families, and they would put their family first. If there's a child that is ill, or a spouse or a elder in the house that is ill, it's the responsibility of the women to then take the day off or something like that. And that was also obvious in some of the research that I did on women in work. What did I look at? Barriers of women at work to actually advance retention and all that. And it was very obvious that the barriers are always there. And all women, whether those who are still working or whether those who have worked for a long time and left and not wanting to come back to work, all agreed that the barriers are there. So everyone knows that the barriers are there, and they are not given the opportunities, even though they know that they have the abilities, they have the leadership, they have everything. But they're just not given the opportunities to take up those positions. And at the same time, when you look at inclusivity, that means like policies that want to include women versus barriers, a lot of women feel that they're not included. More of them complain about not being included in making decisions, in become like part of the organization. So when they leave, they leave because they feel not included in the organization, not because of the barriers. That means they sort of like accept the barriers, but they are more unhappy about not being included as part of the organization. At least that's what my research has shown so far.
Dr. Rana, any thoughts? Maybe Shanina, about you. Yeah.
Just a short one, because Dr. Rachel mentioned about the fact that some women feel left out, especially at the policy making levels. I do believe that this is where in Penang we're so blessed and lucky to have organizations like NGOs like WCC and also the Penang Women's Development Corporation, to which we do see policies and also other programs are done created by women for women. And also in Selangor as well, there's the IWD, Institute Wanita Berdaya. So these are best ways forward. But I think the question right now is how do we emulate that at the federal level? This is where the barrier is, I believe, for most of us, for women.
Can I take some questions from the audience? Susan, at the back.
I think we need to look at like a bigger picture because there's a lot of research that's been done. We go back to like 40 years ago with a lot of university. I think there's a lack of political will and to really push for the women agenda. But I think in the last 20 years or so, we've made quite a lot of progress, especially in the 3 states that you mentioned, especially Selangor and Penang. So the question is, how do we redefine development? How do we redefine what is education? Because if we just go about doing little bits here and there, the critical thinking is not there. Can we help the next generation? Because, like you say, to change, we need 3 generations. Our education system, do we train our children to ask critical questions? I remember the syllabus in Form 6 and in the first year of university. That's where critical thinking takes place. The first year is like the liberal arts, where we did a lot of critical thinking and philosophy, the history, and all that. And even now that day when Rafizi came, one of the questions from the Melaka, he said that you can talk about big development and all that. It doesn't matter who comes into power. You look at, of course, they brought up the 3 island project down south there. So what is development? We ask the question. Whose lifestyle are we fighting for? And it's not just about the Muslim women, and even the young women today, everything is commercialized. From skin to arms to, hands and whatever it is. So if we don't get our children to ask critical questions, what is the meaning of life? What are the values? And this is where the philosophy and critical thinking comes in. Otherwise, you can see young people all going into. I said, you look at TikTok. When I first learned about TikTok, I said, let me have a look what is this TikTok. So I said, hey, not so difficult to get 3 million views. So I went into it. And all it was this very enticing woman on the back. All she did was she just clicked on her and she got 3 million views. No, seriously, it was just so ridiculous. But yet at the same time, we are creative now. We don't get their attention. But that is just like you say, they don't eat anymore. It's just very short span, And even for WCC, we try to get into the media, and we did get some of it across, and even better than in terms of printing books and all that. But it is a challenge. So I want to go back to the younger generation and looking at school systems. Who is the Minister of Education? And even like in Penang, we are fortunate that we can go into the schools because we work with the Ministry of Education in Penang State, we could get in. But not every other state that you can go in there to do the education work. So perhaps if I'm looking into the syllabus, it's not just one level of work. I think it's multi-level. And there's a lot of research done. I really feel there's not enough political will. And I think women shouldn't wait to be asked. We want to do something, we push for it, and we get the opportunity. And that's what I tell the young people is, don't wait for them to invite you. If you have a great idea, start up your agenda and start projects. Because there are success stories around to show that it is possible and that you should be hopeful. So I would like to hear from the academicians about the school syllabus, about the education system, whether you all are able to push or you are aware of people who are doing that kind of work with the younger generation.
Education system now. Can I just mention about the education system?
Please.
Okay. The problem is that many of the holders, as I said just now, they are not rewarded they're not getting a post according to their expertise. There are many educationists who can be leading the schools and so on, but they only want a political person. The present Minister of Education, what is his background? He's a forensic accountant to run the school system in this country. I don't know about forensic accountant. What do? They count how many students are healthy. I don't know. But it is very, very strange. Just like I said, the Ministry of Women is run by a banker and finance. So you have people like Hannah Yo, which was much better at that time. She brought out the issues and so on. But as you talk about development, you're right. The kind of development, what sort of development do you want? Do we want a development mainly to serve the interests of a few people? It's a very class system. Or do you want a development that is for the interests of the majority of the people? Our development so far has been one-sided. If you look at Penang itself, you find that many of the condominiums around Penang, this side of the island, is all 1 million and above. So tell me, who are going to be the occupants of this thing? And what sort of development is it? Why can't we develop, I'm talking about Penang lah, why can't we develop cheaper apartments for people to live in comfort here? Why not? So I think the education system, but you must also remember, in the universities, who appoints the vice chancellors? Do you know that most of the vice chancellors are political appointees? They don't put a radical person there, to run the university like a university. So 11 of the public universities are run by engineers. I have nothing against engineers, okay? Engineers are very skilled people and all that. But can you imagine them running a university like an engine, like a corporate body, So everybody must put what? KPI, is it? KPI, quantitative teaching. If you go to a class of 40 minutes, how do you quantify that quality of the teaching? So everything has become quantifiable, and the university is no longer a place where ideas are developed. Even if ideas are developed in the university, like some lecturers that I know, they are also governed by the University and University College Act before, that you cannot bring down the name of the university. So academic freedom is a controlled kind of freedom. But of course, you still can say don't be scared actually. I think people control themselves too much. And many of the professors and lecturers, they are all the ones that support the ruling system. Everything they say, like Awani and all that, they would come, okay, Professor so-and-so, what do you think? And these are the same professors who will be on the side of the government. Immaterial what government. Last time Pakatan government, they also have their speakers, So now we want people to come out and speak. You must be daring to speak. Because now we don't have the Internal Security Act already, so there's nothing much to be scared of. Except, of course, you get social media to wall up you left and right. You're not covered. God will punish you. You'll go to hell. I don't care, Okay. So if you're not scared, you say it. You must be able to speak. Especially you're an academic, especially in a university. Don't be an ivory tower university. You must go to the grassroots, like Dr. Jaya said. Go and do research and spread it. But the way you spread it, it's not to be read only in the library. Because when you go overseas, you have all these alternative magazines, like alternative history, of King Edward VIII or something. So they have cartoons, but it's all another version of history. Why don't we have comics here in Malaysia, where we also interpret history the other way, But because people here don't read, so I'm always thinking, should we produce cartoons? Should we produce animation? What will make people read? But I think now the social media play an important role, and old people like me, we cannot go into the social media because we cannot even produce our own PowerPoint, But I think people like Selina, and all the young people here, you can form your own progressive media, progressive media like TikTok, whatever you want to perform, you can put all the messages there. This is the role of the young people. But one thing you must remember, you must be brave to speak the truth. If you say, no, what my image will be like, no. If you are very concerned about that, you don't fight. The thing is, you must be able to fight and stand by your point. I think that is very important, especially for the young here. We all old people, we go to the background, pretend to talk about the past, But the young people can do it, I think, Sarina.
I just want to add also a few things about how important decentralization of education is. Because all of the issues that we face right now in this country, it all points back to education. Now, unfortunately, in Malaysian schools, we're not taught of syllabus, or in the classrooms, rather, students, children are not taught on how to be a responsible citizen. The federal constitution is not being taught at all. But if you go abroad in other nations, kids know what their rights are as citizens. And also seeing how social media and internet is prevalent in our societies. Schools, even at primary levels, should introduce media literacy. So there's a complete overhaul, a need to overhaul the education system. That's one. Coming back to education at tertiary levels, like universities. So my mother was actually a colleague of Dr. Rohana. And also my mother, she's exactly like Dr. Rohana, exactly sama. So for me, seeing how some universities have just completely changed from the university I grew up in, being a child following my mother to USM and all of that, it's so different. Because like what Dr. Rohana said, vice chancellors and now faculty heads are politically appointed. They're appointed based on political affiliation and also how well connected they are to receive, or rather obtain, some fundings. So that by itself is damaging. We know that when you introduce certain ideologies, or rather you don't have that control, then you can see what's going on in our education system, be it in government schools to the education levels and tertiary levels. And also one important thing about cultural change, like what you mentioned about women sometimes, especially young girls, when you have an idea, don't be shy, just say it. Just go to anyone, a community leader, someone an adult figure, or an adun and a counselor, whoever. Just say that, hey, I have an idea, just listen to me. Now, we live in a society where women, especially young girls have been socially conditioned to be quiet. Society teaches girls and young girls, you're not supposed to speak loud. You're supposed to have an opinion. That's why organizations like Sisters in Islam make extremists very uncomfortable. So this is where adults, like all of us here, we have a very important role, a big responsibility to make sure that the girls, young ladies, know that they have a space. And we provide them that space, that platform. And while we do it, we tell the men, we tell the boys and young men to respect what women have to say.
That's really, really inspiring. Right. I'm actually feeling it right now. Dr. Rachel, do you have any thoughts to add? Okay. So for now, I think given the current climate that we are in right now, I think I can't not ask a question on women and political representation. So for this country, for Malaysia, we are far from achieving the minimum 30% representation of women in politics. So as of GE14, we actually achieved our highest percentage of women representation in politics ever in all these years of independence. And these are the numbers, highest numbers ever. 14.4% for members of parliament, 12.3% for state assembly persons. And these, again, I reiterate, were the highest numbers ever. So I guess with Dr. Rohana here and as well as YB Shalina here, and of course, Dr. Rachel, please add your thoughts to this as well. What is the importance of giving women a voice in politics? And what are some of the challenges that you have faced in your course as a politician that your male colleagues may not necessarily face? Maybe our active YB can go first.
There's a lot of challenges for women, not just in politics. Obviously, challenges in politics, yeah, that's taking it to a different level. Now, based on my experience, some of the feedback that I received when trying to get women to become more politically active is that they fear the prosecution and the attacks, because when women get attacked, it's more personal. They attack on how you look, how you dress, who you go out with, what time you go out with, just ridiculous questions. But then when men get attacked, it's quite professional. So that by itself makes it very off-putting for some women. I'm not saying that wanita takut, but this is where, again, women need to know that you have a great resource. It's everywhere. And there are also like-minded women out there. So why not join in the fight? That's what I always say. But it boils down to the fact that, yes, number one is the attacks. Also, just to share with everyone here my personal experience. So back in 2015, I wrote, a statement that was published in Malaysia Kini, a statement questioning, Friday sermons. Like, why do the Friday sermons always have to be so hateful, especially towards women? When you have a public space to broadcast messages, you should focus on positive values, nation building. So the English statement was fine, but the moment when the statement was translated to Bahasa, that was when I received all sorts of attacks. And to the point where one day I woke up and there was this poster on Facebook stating that I intend to destroy Islamic institutions based on my political affiliation. So I remember just waking up to that, and I was scared, just like everybody else. Like, why would anyone be that vengeful and hateful over something that I wanted to share? But obviously I did not say anything like that. That would be just ridiculous. And then that particular poster got circulated, became viral and this and that, and I lodged a police report. Nothing happened. This thing happened again and again and again, and I lodged about 7 police reports until 2018 after GE14. Then one day I received a death threat and I lodged another police report. That's 8 police reports. But I guess action was taken then because we were finally in federal government, although for a short while. But I saw changes. But that's just it. How we fight as women tend to be very different than men because of the attacks. Because of the attacks from some men and also some of the attacks by some women. And this is something that I think we need to sit down again and again to discuss on how can we come out from this quagmire to figure something out and how we can rise together.
This is a very interesting question about women representation in politics. The main question is the quality of the woman leadership in politics and the concentration, the focus of women in politics. It's always on how the women in politics is dressed, like Rina Harun, okay, how they look like, whether they dress up nicely, whether they wear hijab. So it came to my mind, you know, when a reporter asked Angela Merkel last time, the German chancellor, then she prime minister, he said, "Why is it you're still wearing the same coat during a whole premiership of 8 years, I think, right? 8 or 15 years?" Then she said, "Excuse me, I am the prime minister. I am not a model. So see, importance of your appearance shouldn't be there. It's the quality of your leadership. You know, so if you have 14%, you have 20% women in parliament. If one thing, if they keep on bowing to the concepts that is in the mainstream, you're not going to bring any changes to the women. For instance, issue of child abuse. What has the ministry come up with? Child abuse. Oh, they said we have counseling line. We have to teach the perpetrator. This is all old method, you know. You must bring in something new. So this is the problem. It's all connected to the political system and the ideology of the society. When the political system is connected to, you know, women, 14%, okay, you should be happy. But the quality of women there, we should have to question. Are the women interested in bringing up women's issues? I mean, fairer issue, gender equality, or they're only bowing to the interests of the main political party? Okay, now we have a deputy women minister in the women ministry. She comes from PAS party, okay? Whose view would she propagate? Would she say, oh, Muslim women now should be given more, I say, and so on? She won't dare because she is representing PAS. So I think affiliation to the main political party, the ideology in society, all this will determine the quality of the women leadership. If you are there, you know, looking good, smile here and smile there, you know, and you dare not say, if you say something that the male from your political party will chuck you out. So what are you going to say? You're not going to say anything about women. So if you are appointed there, if the 14% of women speaks well of gender equality, no segregation of sexes, ideology of how to look at women in society, if they dare bring this out, then it's worth having 14%. Even if you have 50% of women who are controlled in this kind of patriarchal ideology, what's the point? To me, it's not the quantity, it's the quality of women representation in parliament and in the state. This is how I see it, you know.
Yeah, I would agree with what Dr. Rana said, because even if there's 50% or even more women and they make no difference, I think it just defeats the purpose altogether.
Can I have some questions from the audience? I think we have time for a couple more questions.
So what you say, giving a good explanation, the human problem, child abuse problem, housing problem, employment problem. There's so many problems. Not today. So many years, every politician talk about it, the poverty, everything, every drama, every political system, they are talking to reach in the right place, how to avoid all these bad things to avoid. But what I come to understand, those persons who talk about democracy, those persons who talk about poverty, when they come to the power, they are the one sabotage the democracy. They are the one sabotage the workers' right. So how to solve? When in the politically in the platform, they want to solve all the problems They want to give a good governance. But when the end, worse than before, the changes don't bring any changes. Before, sometime there's some government making some wrong based on the development. Some party complain, they are not look after the people's right, the people's purchasing power not improved. All that doesn't have a good incentive. But then they sit on the power. They do worse than them before. Pagar makan pagi. How to solve the problem? This kind of meeting, so many meetings I attend. Political meeting, drama, all good. Very powerful speech. They say like a godfather, take everybody as a godfather. But when come to power, it's not function. The rich come richer, the poor go richer. Go poor. You know, after Penang government, take up the Penang government, DAP after tea. The complaining, the Gerakan party, they not look after the housing scheme. But now DAP came, they build $1 million, like the madam said. But what happening in Penang? Most of the houses, local houses, occupied by the foreigners. And those who got the money, they buy 2-3 houses, rented. But here the working people, no house, no job. Foreigners got job, got house. How the government is protect the Penang people, the voters? What is going on? What is going on?
Sir, can I have your question, please?
Yeah.
What is the question that you are wanting to ask our panelists?
I cannot catch up your point. What is?
What is the question that you want to ask our
No,
panelists?
The question is now we are talking, we giving a good idea. We are discussing what the solution, what the end, what the solution. We change government, also same thing. Pagar makan pagi, where to go?
Okay, so the question is what is the solution, right? And I think our panelists have been talking a lot about the changes that are needed. Where do we go forward from here? And I think that has been that's been talked about a lot in the last hour that you are discussing. But at the same time, does our panelists have any additional feedback for the gentleman? Okay. Maybe I can take another question.
I got a quick one. If I want to find out more information about what we were discussing, if I want to find out more information about what we were discussing in this forum, right? Does the book have all the information for me to refer to?
Next book says Dr. Rohana.
There will be some information in the book, I'm sure, but perhaps not a complete capture of what we are discussing today.
I think Dr. Rachel has stated some measures that should be taken. I think you should read the book and have a teacher's voice. Yeah. I think if you read the book, and she has made some recommendations, which I think are very useful. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you.
And it's actually, this is a personal response. When I was reading the case studies of the women in prison, my eyes actually welled up because some of them were so naive. So it goes back to education, like Sharina mentioned. So naive, and some of the situations that they found themselves in could have been avoided. Had there been some sort of intervention through education, for example. So it is really sad, and it's true that we are all worried to voice our feelings, basically, especially those who are not educated. But they can From the case studies, they knew that what was happening to them was wrong, but they had no recourse, not knowing where to go. So she has outlined certain things, but will action be taken? Will steps be taken to ameliorate the situation? That's what we're asking. And of course, people who are schooled and educated, they can voice up. What about the lower income, like Dr. Wan mentioned, P40, under P40, and the rural places, for example? How are we to help them?
A little also a response. Basically, I think this is one area that has escaped a lot of attention. I think I just refer to the issues Dalits. Dalit issue is particular to India, but that thing has also crept, has seeped into this country on account of the fact that these many of these people, many of those who are now entrenched in the estates or outside of the estates, are all again affected by this issue of Dalitization. What it really means is that first, there is already the caste problem among the Indian Hindus, the Indians. That's one problem. Dalit actually means, what it means is that this caste problem actually really trends down to where the estates and subsequently when the people moved out from the estates, especially the South Indians, a large segment of them that moved out. And lately, we found that all these issues are still present on either nascent or present, meaning, for instance, dowry system. There is, you need to put in a certain amount of jewels for the wife to be. In fact, you do all these systems of Dalit, whereby these people are actually discriminated, and much so the women, Dalit women are really discriminated. And then I've done a bit of study, some measures across the Transcriam estate. Very recently, about a year or so back, we found that the whole practice is very rampant, meaning marriages are decided on dowry. Not only marriages are decided on dowry, the other issues related to when you have when you menstruate, you are still treated. You're not allowed to function as if are part of the unit. So, in short, this sort of discrimination, perhaps very subtle and very latent, still is present. I think Mr. Krishnan will agree with me when we work in a. So, it's very unfortunate. Very little work is being done. I think I've been asked to take up this issue. I'll be very happy to work along with the group here to look into this issue of Dalits being marginalized, especially in this country, because a very large proportion will come out from the estates and who are now basically into the urban slums that we are facing this horrendous problem.
I believe there's a chapter in the book that talks about women in the estates, right? So maybe Dr. Rohana, Dr. Rachel can elaborate a little bit on that.
I just want to continue with what Dr. Jaya says, because you see that many of them in the estates were from the lower caste. In many of the estates that have been taken over to build development, all these poor Indians have been driven out and given a kind of squatter places, low cost and all that. And these have created gangsterism among the Indians. This is one of the main factors where the Indians, when they went to the urban areas, The father cannot work anymore, he's 40 plus. The mother will be sweeper in one of the buildings. The children are not used to education in the urban areas. And they were, before that, they were in a rural school. So gangsterism has become a big problem around, Bukit Kiara and all this. Bukit Kiara used to be an estate there, a lot of the estates. But many of the Indians were pushed into the urban areas without any source of income. So you find that many of the older men, older women, the older men take up drinking. It become a big problem. So the social problem among the working class Indians in the urban areas are due to them being driven out of the estate without proper compensation. This is there has been study done on that as well. So besides, you said the continuation of the caste system is true, but the social problem that has been created because they were driven out of the estate is a big area. But I think now gangsterism has reduced in some way. Many of them got killed in custody and all that. The case of death in custody, thousands are killed the last 10 years. Death in custody is a real issue. People go there with a healthy, like just like the Iranian girl. She's only 23, 24, you go down. And then by Wednesday, that person is dead. And then there's no CCTV in the cell. So they say that, why is this person dead? Oh, heart attack. Of course, the sent to forensic lab. Forensic lab will also concur with the police because they are paid by the government. Except for Pontip, there's a lady in Thailand. She is a forensic, but she managed to get the support of the king and all that. She has her own ministry where when forensic results come in, it go through her ministry to check whether the forensic are properly done or is it biased for the government. So now you find that a lot of the deaths in custody, which are thousands of them for your information, many of them say, oh, they die because sick lah, wrong medicine lah, heart attack lah, stroke lah. But where do these people get stroke and heart attack? They're only 25 years old. They just enter the police custody for 1 week and they're dead. So these are real issues in Malaysia, These affect mainly the working class, They have to go find jobs and all that, go join gangsterism. Then they're caught by the police, that's it. You are in custody, you are at their mercy, I'm not saying all the police are bad, but of course there are good policemen around. But the system is such that it's very oppressive towards the working class. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, but it's a big social problem. Yeah, but it's a big social problem. You look at Kajang and all that. The main gangsters there are the Indian. But why? Don't tell me it's natural tendency for the Indian to become gangsters. No, right? It's not, again. But it's a social, it's a social circumstances that make them gangsters.
Dr. Rachel, anything to add?
Yeah, I think chapter 3 where Veronica goes through what actually happened in the estates and how they were driven out and, because of development and all. She brings up a lot of case studies that talks about this, and she didn't use the word Dalitization as what Dr. Jaya had used, but generally you can see the issues that were brought up, because of the move from the rural to the urban areas.
Shalina, you have any short feedback on the issue that was raised?
Yeah, just a overall short feedback. I think it's quite obvious that whatever it is, when we talk about changing things, we need political will. We need also to check the quality of leaders that are in place. Because one of the main issues that we face right now, because right now we find ourselves asking questions, why is this not happening? What can we do? The people who should act on these questions, formulate better plans, are those sitting in federal levels right now. And rather than trying to find ways to better this country and trying to find ways to answer our concerns, no, they just use race, religion, that's it. I mean, how many of us here, we face situations where we actually ask questions such as education or the economy, and then when someone doesn't know how to answer it, jangan persoalkan hak setengah individu. So when we're faced with such answers that centers on religion, it makes us very uncomfortable to pursue it. So that's where discussions stop. And that's when progress and reforms take a back seat. So again, it boils down to political will, education, and also the quality of leaders. And one last thing, yeah, just to remind that it's not just the DAP government, but it's the Pakatan, it's the state government. So when it comes to certain issues such as housing, again, this is something that I don't believe we right now have the answers to. But this is an ongoing thing where you talk to the policymakers, you talk with the academicians and whatnot, then find some better ways to improve the situation that we face right now.
Thank you. And I think that it's almost time. We've reached the end of our session. So before I formally close, I'd like to invite our three panelists. Any last closing remarks? Rachel, Dr. Rohana, YB?
For my first remark, I think piecemeal system is not going to work. For me, I believe in the overhaul structure of the whole system, a system that is more fair and more towards the majority of the people, not for the minority, which create a bigger income and wealth among the people. If you get about 10% of the people control 80% of the economy, I think there's something quite not right there, So I would prefer a system that gives, say, 80% of the wealth to at least 70% of the people. The 10%, they can go and get their wealth elsewhere. They can go to Panama Island, they can go to Switzerland and all that. It doesn't matter, They're well all over the world. But I think our system has to change. And I think the neoliberal policy of any government also has to change. If I say you change more to socialism, then I'll be arrested. Now you're on YouTube, right? So I believe that mainly you look at China, the socialist system has worked quite well. Of course, people don't agree. They say, the Chinese system is too technology. But they have got rid of their poverty by leaps and bounds. So maybe reason might have the certain tight control. But I think if you want to serve, some solution to the poverty, hardcore poverty, you have to adopt a certain socialistic policy and stand. This is my stand, They say, oh, you too socialist, you communist and all that. Okay, but never mind, But I still feel that people, the majority of people in the country, should be given better income, housing, jobs, and so on. In material, whether you are Chinese, Malay, or Indians, we are all Malaysians. We should be treated equal. We should be given what is needed, not based on race, but based on your needs. This is my philosophy.
Shalina, a few last words.
Just a few. And everything what Dr. Rohana mentioned, these are values that I believe as well. It comes to the point where, enough is enough. And I think Malaysians, regardless of, again, race, religion, sexual orientation, whatnot, we should be treated as equals and also be given equal opportunities. Now, 2018, I believe, was a political awakening for all of us. Suddenly we saw that change can happen. And if you look and compare to other democratic nations, Malaysia is still very much new. We just started. Our political journey to where we want to go has just started. And I think that it will get very interesting within the next few days, weeks, and months. So whatever it is, continue discourse, continue discussions. And if you believe what is right, by all means, stand by your convictions and say it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to our three panelists tonight. Round of applause for them. And thank you to the audience for spending your time with us, a full 2 hours. I hope it has been very fruitful and interesting for all of you. And as for my last words, please buy the book. Thank you very much.
More discussion on this, please. Oh, yeah, you want to take a photo? Oh, okay, sure, photo every time. But you have to take all.